morning.
All right, everybody. Chris Cuomo here. Welcome to NewsNation. Good news, I hope. Israel and the terrorists have reportedly agreed to phase one of the peace deal. That is according to U.S. government sources. NewsNation was first to report this development. A source told us the actual return of the hostages could happen in the next 48 hours. Now, the exchange may not happen until a little later this weekend. Why? Could be timing, could be related to the president's latest announcement that he is heading to the Middle East on Sunday. To be very clear, neither the Israeli government nor Hamas has confirmed that this is the case. But if true, phase one would mean all 48 hostages come home. Remember, less than half are believed to still be alive, but this would mean so much to so many who've waited so long in Israel. The president said on social media, all parties will be treated fairly. This is a great day for the Arab and Muslim world, Israel, all surrounding nations, and the United States of America. Blessed are the peacemakers, wrote the president in all caps, a biblical reference from the Beatitudes. Let me bring in someone who is the right guy to talk to. Middle East expert, negotiated for presidents from both parties, Aaron David Miller. Surprised? How cautiously optimistic should we be?
I think for phase one, Chris, return of hostages for an asymmetrical number of Palestinian prisoners, 250 of which are accused of killing Israelis, another 1,700 the Israelis picked up since October 7. An Israeli withdrawal, limited though it may be, not redeployed out of Gaza, but to a line of withdrawal that's probably far too expansive for Hamas and not enough for Benjamin Netanyahu. It offers, at a minimum, a respite, Chris. And you pointed this out many times, from the human dimension of this story, the willful and indiscriminate killing of Israeli civilians, the sexual predation, the mutilation, the taking of hostages, the willful execution of hostages by Hamas, and the Israeli prosecution of the war, the expansion of Israel's capacity to absorb killing Hamas fighters, terrorists, but also involving an exponential number of Palestinian civilian deaths and a humanitarian unprecedented catastrophe in Gaza. It offers for the first time, and today is the beginning of the third year of this war, Chris. It offers a respite, and perhaps with the kind of leadership that is required, it may well, at some point lead to an end to the war in Gaza in ways that normal humans, let's say you and I, for example, would actually say to one another, you know, the war in Gaza has ended, but we cannot say that now. I'm not a religious man, Chris, but I offer a prayer, and I will say this. I've made it clear my views about Donald Trump's efforts to undermine Americans' norms and institutions and constitutionally undermine a government that he's literally constitutionally sworn to protect. But Donald Trump on this one has demonstrated a degree of will unlike any other president, Republican or Democrat. He has pressed an Israeli prime minister in a way that none of his predecessors have ever done on an issue that prime minister considers vital to his political survival and the way he would define Israeli security requirements. So on this one, Chris, the sun, the moon, and the stars, Hamas is weaker. The Arabs impose significant pressure. The Qataris and Turks, not an Arab country, a Muslim country, and Donald Trump. Sun, the moon, and the stars aligned to be able to envision an implementation of the first phase. And from a human point of view, Chris, that's really right now, hostages, their families, and Palestinian civilians in Gaza, it offers real hope.
And also, you know, look, I think it is a fair critique of the situation that the hostage families have not been the main priority. They started off as the main priority. That was the rallying cry, but they have had to wait. And it is good that their closure comes first, whether they're waiting on someone who is alive or who has been murdered. by Hamas. In your experience, what does history suggest about which side is more likely to not want to continue beyond phase one?
I mean, it's a really good question. I mean, the real problem, I think, Chris, is that Hamas's end state and that of Benjamin Netanyahu are simply mutually irreconcilable. Hamas wants to survive, at a minimum as an insurgency, not as a military organization. That's finished for now. Wants to survive as a political force in Gaza, able to exercise its influence through co-optation and intimidation. Doesn't want to govern Gaza, doesn't want that responsibility, and wants to keep its weapons. Israel, on the other hand, wants to see Hamas decimated as a military organization and its influence in Gaza eradicated. The exile of what remains of its senior leadership and the demilitarization, the decommissioning of its weapons. I don't see how right now you break that fundamental impasse, because the Israelis are not going to withdraw as long as Hamas exists as an insurgency with its weapons and its tunnel infrastructure, half the length of the New York subway system, probably 40% of it is still intact. Israelis will not withdraw. And if they don't, you're never going to get an Arab or Muslim boots on the ground. Can you imagine Arab and Muslim boots on the ground with Hamas and Israel going at one another? What are they going to do? They're not going to kill Palestinians, and they're not going to hold Israel's coat while Israel kills Palestinians. So that's a fundamental impasse, and I don't know with the leaders we have whether or not we're going to be able to get there. Right now, Benjamin Netanyahu, I'm sure, is thinking how to turn this to his electoral advantage. There are going to be elections in 2026, either in the spring, before or after the Jewish holiday of Passover, unless the government goes to term. And he needs Donald Trump to get reelected. Trump, who is more popular in Israel than he is. So
reelected. I think that he needs some type of non-prosecution agreement, and they get rid of him. I don't know that Netanyahu is the right guy for the peace phase of this, but he's going to want a non-prosecution agreement. Otherwise, there's going to be a lot of drama over there, which they do not need. You know, while you were talking, Aaron, they were showing some of the IDF selects from October 7th, and I think it's really important. We don't show that very often. I'm actually kind of surprised that we're showing it now. I'm very much in favor of showing it. I think the IDF made a mistake in sanitizing early things. Yes, the dead babies or the headless babies thing never really panned out. And that was unfortunate because it wound up being an immediate departure from the truth early on. But the cold and calculating way that October 7th went down has to be remembered. No matter how you feel about the scale and scope of destruction in Gaza, human and property, and it is an awesome amount of destruction of human life and property. The calculated genocidal plan that was carried out on October 7th, people have to remember it because it is an everyday memory in every Israeli's mind. And these guys liked it, they wanted it, and they prosecuted it methodically that day while making sure they were filming it. That's what Israelis have to come to grips with for this to end. That's part of it as well. Aaron David Miller, I got to jump. I appreciate you. Thank you for the perspective, and thank you for being with me in this moment. I hope it is an historic one.
Back at you, Chris, and thanks for having me.
All right, brother, let me jump. Yes, sir. 4 minutes and 35 seconds coming up. So, back here at home, okay? I am here for what is about to happen, okay? I don't think it should be about posturing and chest pumping and, oh yeah, come get some. You want some? You know where I am. Listen, that's for the schoolyard. This is for the courts. Where is the line and what are the questions about the governor of a state, Illinois, versus the President of the United States? Two questions, okay? And people aren't getting them right. The questions, forget about the answers. One, when can a president do this and what will courts recognize? And two, what is the responsibility of the governor with respect to the federal agency and law enforcement on the federal level? That's the biggie. I break it down with two much better minds next. Okay, so the latest on the National Guard movements around the country is that 200 or more National Guard are officially in Illinois getting ready to go to Chicago. Is this about gang shootings? Not anymore. According to the president, this isn't about crime. It's about political compliance. The president posted today, quote, Chicago mayor should be in jail for failing to protect ICE officers. Governor Pritzker, too. Now, are local authorities supposed to protect ICE? No. Is ICE unable to function in Chicago? That is a real question. Now, if you want the answer to be no, they can't, you point to Saturday. Immigration agents got surrounded by protesters, resulting in one protester getting shot. Is that able to function or is it not able to function? Why wasn't ICE afforded a local perimeter of protection? That is the question that must be litigated and has political and legal aspects to it. What are local authorities legally supposed to do where ICE is involved? This has to be litigated. It's a gray area. Why? Chicago is a sanctuary city, okay? Are you allowed to have sanctuary cities? Is that a constitutional thing? Yes, but if the sanctuary city law violates or contradicts federal law, you can't be here if you're illegal, you can be here if you're illegal, then that violates the Constitution. It violates the Supremacy Clause, which means that if federal and state law conflict, federal law wins. But then why is it a gray area? Because that's not what sanctuary city laws often say all over this country. It is more about, hey, you can't tell us to do your job, ICE. You have to do it. And we are not going to help you do your job. Now, is that just states, Democratic states, saying no to the federal government? No. That is what one of the most conservative justices of all time, Antonin Scalia, decided, that under the 10th Amendment, the federal government cannot deputize or enlist local cops to do their job and insist on it. The feds have to come in and do it themselves. But do the locals have a duty, legal duty, to keep ICE safe? That's going to be litigated. Now, the political question is, does the Democrat look strong to other Democrats by saying, not only am I not going to help ICE, but I'm going to make it very painful for them here, even if that means communities attack them? That's tricky. One law that sanctuary cities like Chicago have that I do not think will pass muster is prohibiting states and cities from preventing their cops from exchanging immigration information with federal officials. Do you know where this guy lives? Do you have a jacket on this guy? You know, has he been prosecuted before? And that is what Chicago does. So, political and legal. Let's go over both with much better minds on this, okay? Not on the political side, but look, I get what Pritzker's doing. Democrats want muscular resistance to what the president is doing, full stop. When it comes to ICE, that's an easy thing to want because ICE is arguably overreaching, hyper-prosecuting, and getting way more than bad hombres in these roundups. And it's hurting communities, and you could argue the fabric of this country. So let's talk about the law. Former federal prosecutor Gene Rossi, okay? Trump attorney Jesse Binnall. Jesse, let me start with you, and thank you both for being here. Jesse, what is the argument that ICE can't operate? Therefore, to effectively enforce federal law, the president must call in the National Guard.
Chris, thanks for having me. And here's the point on this, is that the National Guard is there to be federalized when there is this federal issue that's in place. And when you have a state like Illinois right now that is allowing people to obstruct the work of federal prosecutors so clearly the way that they are in Illinois, that is an appropriate time for calling in the National Guard. It's been done in this country time and time again. There is a federal interest at play here, and it is absolutely appropriate that the National Guard be called in to protect ICE's ability to get the job done.
Two questions. One, it has not been done time and time again. This is something that happens very rarely unless a governor is asking for it. But the second question is the fact question. Gene, can the government make the case that they can't do the job when they have a record number of arrests happening in Chicago and everywhere else? How is that not doing the job?
Well, let me just give you some history here, Chris, and my colleague Jesse. My wife went to Ole Miss, and in 1962, they federalized the National Guard to enforce the
desegregation under the Insurrection Act.
Well, yes, and that was to allow James Meredith to enter Ole Miss and integrate the schools. But I just want to say this. I was a federal prosecutor in EDVA, which has taken a lot of hits lately, but I did a lot of immigration cases, illegal reentry. And here's what you can't do. I don't care whether it's Governor Pritzker or a Republican governor. You cannot ignore court orders. So when ICE or any federal agency sends a court order to a detention center or some facility that's controlled by the local or state government, and the order says turn over a body, you cannot ignore a court order. What these sanctuary cities are doing is, if we get an administrative request, we're not going to honor that. I have one solution. It's called Congress. If they really want to add meat to the bones, they will tell local and government officials in Illinois and other states that you got to comply with a court order, but also an administrative request to turn over a body. So that's the legal basis that I'm focusing on.
Yeah, but, Gene, you lost me there. I know you're right, but now we're out of the realm of law and back into politics, and Congress has abandoned its duty. These men and women who do the job on the border have begged for rule changes more than anything else for decades. Congress won't do it because this works better for them than solving it. It allows one to say Democrats have no head, and it allows the other to say Republicans have no heart. Jesse, when I look at these pictures, I see local and state cops creating perimeters around ICE. What do you think? Well, I got to tell you, I think your best argument is don't make a fact argument because the courts are going to defer to the president, give him the right to be wrong, even if he's wrong about the facts and whether or not ICE can do its job. The courts will defer to him. It's his call to make whether it's right or wrong. Is that good policy, though? If he's wrong and they are doing the job and you don't need the National Guard and God forbid the National Guard uses force against somebody?
Well, I mean, first of all, I think there is an important point there, Chris, and that is, most cops in places like Illinois and throughout America are good cops trying to do their job and protect against this lawlessness. And yes, we always want to let good cops be cops. But there comes a point where the politicians get in the way, and politicians getting in the way is, I think, what we're seeing here right now. And that is the point where I think the president is absolutely right, and he has that constitutional duty that he is the commander in chief. And in order to protect the American people and execute his duties as president of the United States, he has the obligation to step in and do that, because the cops too much right now and in a lot of places are just being hung out to dry by the political leadership, and that's what has to stop.
Hey, Gene, isn't Pritzker's best play not to chest bump with Trump? I mean, look, I guess that's what passes for toughness these days, and the Democrats are so desperate for somebody to talk back at Trump. But isn't his most muscular opinion to go in and win in court and say federal law is being enforced? They are doing their job. I am protecting them the way I'm supposed to. And he doesn't need the National Guard and win. Isn't that the best way?
Absolutely. And I want to go, there's a judge in Oregon, Karen Immergut. And the reason I mentioned her, she issued one or two opinions recently, and she's no flaming left-wing lunatic. She worked for Ken Starr and interviewed Monica Lewinsky. She was an AUSA, assistant U.S. attorney, a Trump U.S. attorney, now a Trump judge. She held that President Trump she respectfully disagreed that there was an emergency that justified the use of the National Guard. To get to your point, Chris, I think Pritzker should follow the law because it's on his side. I don't think President Trump has the basis to declare an emergency, in this case, in Chicago or LA or any other state that they're going into.
Yeah. You know, I'm with you. I get it, Gene. I do have a concern looking at the pattern of the decisions and some of the jurisprudence here, doing some homework on it. The courts do have a tendency to allow a president the right to be wrong about a factual basis for an emergency. I don't think that they are used to this kind of president and how he can abuse facts, but I think there is a built-in jurisprudential idea of deference to him. I just wish they were only arresting bad hombres, and then you wouldn't have this problem in the first place. If you weren't grabbing people that were fundamental to communities, people wouldn't be so pissed off. Anyway, let me jump. Gene, thank you. Jesse, always a pleasure. Appreciate you making the case. 4 minutes and 30 seconds. So what does Stephen A. think? How does this play phase one being accepted to? What is the right level of excitement? Who looks good and not so good on the National Guard? What do you think triggers people? Stephen A. understands how people process politics, and that's why I ask him on. And he looks good. Next. Stephen A. Smith is the straight shooter. Great show on Sirius XM. Great show on his YouTube channel. Always giving us the right kind of perspective, and I want him in on this potentially historic night that we're having here. It is good to see you, sir. Thank you very much for being with me, as always. So, how do you feel about phase one's announcement? Do you think that it's cautious optimism? You think Trump is making it seem too certain, but he is going over there? How big a win?
Well, I think it's cautious optimism. I think it warrants that. Because anytime you're talking about all 48 hostages being returned, that's a big deal. We understand that. And we understand how debilitating this whole process has been over the last couple of years, how many lives were lost, the reputation of so many people, particularly Netanyahu in Israel, because even though, you know, he was warranted to some degree to be on the attack the way that he was because of what happened when folks invaded Israel and they kidnapped over 1,000 people and so many lives were lost. In the same breath, I think we have to pay attention to what's been transpiring, particularly over the last year. I've spoken to numerous individuals within the Jewish community that have been highly concerned about the anti-Semitism that has been ravaging our nation, and they were pointing to the fact that, you know, so many people out there were hating on the Jewish community. And I would tell them, yes, I see some of that, but what I really, really see is people hating on Netanyahu. And I see folks in the Jewish community even speaking out against Netanyahu. And so that's something that we have to be sensitive to, because you have to draw a distinction between those two issues. One issue is Netanyahu, and then the other is the Jewish community, and how for some folks may feel it's completely justifiable what he has done when you consider how ravaged the Gaza Strip looks, you know, how it seems so unlivable, people starving and things of that nature. And in the same breath, they look at him and they think that he's been a bit excessive because he's a war hawk. And then you have others from Israel and within the Jewish community throughout this country that thinks he's completely justified. And so working through all of that, trying to decipher it, not being a Jewish individual myself and knowing many people who are not Jewish, who aren't educated and knowledgeable about the specifics that involve so much that has gone on in that region for all of these years, it's really, really hard to have a definitive opinion about it other than seeing people suffering and wanting it to stop. So when you get closer to a peace deal and you're talking about hostages being returned and you're talking about Israel stepping back a little bit and people are going to be fed and you're not going to see starving people on camera crying for food and shelter and water and stuff like that, how can you sit up there and say that's a bad thing? That is a good thing.
Hey, you can see it whenever you want in Syria. You can see it in Sudan. You can see it in Yemen. You can see it in a lot of places. It just seems that people only care about it when they see it in Gaza. And getting these, you know, they started off with 250 plus people who had been stolen. To get these people home alive or dead, the The families have waited too long. I'm glad that happens, even if nothing else happens. And we have to be open to that because we are dealing with terrorists on one side of this. Now, here at home, Stephen A., how do you see both sides' advantage, disadvantage when it comes to the National Guard? The needle's moved a little bit, right? Because we're not just talking about crime anymore. Now we're talking about kind of political compliance.
Well, number one, let's make sure that we don't have the National Guard roaming the streets of America and on the orders of the president invading states where you have governors like Westmoreland, Maryland, governors like Pritzker in Illinois and others saying, we're the commander-in-chief of our respective state. You're violating the Constitution by bringing these people into our state without our approval. Let's make sure that we don't have to sit around and hear that. That's number one. But the other side to all of this is, you know, in Washington, D.C., obviously that's run by the federal government. We understand that Trump was perfectly within his right to set the National Guard in there. When Trump sits down and says, hey, if you want my help, I'm more than willing to give it to you because the streets are not safe in various parts of this nation. I have been on the record stating that while I'm sure crime exists everywhere, I'm from the streets of New York City. Hell, it exists here. I'm sure it exists in Memphis and Portland and L.A. and stuff like that. I get that part. Chicago has always been a special scenario for me because Obama was in office as a junior senator. He was in the Capitol as a junior senator. It was going on then. It was going on before then. It was going on when he got there. Mm-hmm. It was going on when he was the president of the United States. It was going on when he departed and Trump was there his first term. It was going on with Biden, and it's still going on. And I don't believe, and I don't care what the data says, I don't care what kind of numbers they try to throw out at us. It has always, if you are a black person, you cannot deny how disturbing it repeatedly is that most often when you hear about violence, particularly in the streets of America, never escapes you that Chicago is always mentioned. And little to nothing has been done about it from a national perspective. So what you find yourself saying is, on one hand, Governor Pritzker, I don't agree with Donald Trump trying to send National Guardsmen to Chicago against your will. But I would also ask Governor Pritzker, why isn't it in your will to ask the feds for assistance? Because it appears like you've needed it. And so, and let's not politicize it.
It's about what it is, right? So Trump got a win on the politics of the optics about, so you're saying you don't need any help with crime? And the Democrats looked like they'd rather have crime than have Trump get a win, right? That's what Bondi meant. I wish you loved Chicago as much as you hate Trump. That's a clever line. But the real response was, no, I'll take your help, but it's about what kind. I want the DEA, I want the Vice Squad, I want the anti-gang squads, I want the alcohol and firearms in here. That's it. I don't want the National Guard. That would have been the right response.
Yes, you're absolutely right. And listen, if I'm the governor of a state and it's crime written, I'm not turning down federal assistance. I'm having a conversation with the president, and I'm okay. Can I use some federal agents? Can I get some undercover folks? Can I do whatever it is that's going to quell or dissipate the level of crime that's invading my respective state and the city under which it resides? I'm going to do that, and I'm not going to lie if he sends in the National Guard to protect federal property. If that's necessary, I'm not going to politicize it and lie just to save face and act like that's not happening.
I'm with you on that, but I do have a pushback on that one. So I see the crime one way, National Guard's not the right way, but accept the help. On ICE, you got to stop arresting people who do not have any place as a bad hombre. You know, that's why people are coming out. People care about the people in their communities. We don't judge our neighbors on the basis of how you got into the country in a lot of especially in big cities. And there is hyper enforcement. There is overreach. They are doing stuff to people in Chicago and in other cities that people don't want to see. And I think there is a policy of harshness that exceeds the lawfulness of the actions.
Well, a policy of harshness emanates from the fact that he's conducting himself like he's xenophobic. And when you've campaigned what some would argue on xenophobia, then it's predictable what kind of actions he would take, which is why, once again, we harken back to Capitol Hill and these elected officials that are supposed to show a spine, members of the Republican Party on the GOP, so busy fawning over every little thing that he does. I mean, before they say hello, they got to kiss his you-know-what, talking about how wonderful he is and how great he is and how he's the leader we all need. You talking about, I mean, this is just ridiculous. And then when you look at the respective states, again, it is problematic, and you have to understand that. But the flip side to it is that, you know what, we're a gorgeous mosaic. That's what America is all about. And we embrace people who look differently, come from different ethnic backgrounds, speak different languages, stuff like that. We accept anybody, and we embrace anybody who's willing to make a contribution to the civilized society that we're supposed to be. And you would hope that our leaders wouldn't be acting in a xenophobic fashion. But unfortunately, it's worked for them. One could easily argue that played a role in him getting 77 million votes. And if that's the kind of thing that got him elected and empowered him, and then you take into account the midterms are coming up, and then after that, the 2028 election, where he's not expected to circumvent the 22nd Amendment of the Constitution, where he's going to run for a third term, but he does want to be powerful and influential enough where he's still pulling puppet strings and getting people to do his bidding, even when he's out of office. If that's the agenda, and it seems to be working for him, then it's not a surprise, nor is it unpredictable that he's going to take a certain approach if he's convinced that it works for him. You got to prove that it's not going to work for him, and so he can find something different to focus on.
Very, very well said. And this is why I asked Stephen A. to once again, with all that he has going on, to make time for you. And he said yes, as he always does. Wednesday, October 15th, Stephen A. Smith and Bill O'Reilly are going to join me at the Kennedy Center in Washington, D.C., our biggest venue to date. I like that they positioned me in front of you guys like that, by the way. Look at my shoulders. That's enhanced, but I like it. So we're going to tackle the biggest issues facing the country. We're going to have big names in politics and podcasts. And I got Stephen A. I can't lose. Thank you for being with me, my brother, and thank you for your contribution.
No problem. Appreciate you, bro. See you soon.
Straight shooter. All right, we'll be right back. 4 minutes and 15 seconds. Up next, Charlie Kirk's murder was a catalyst for a lot of things in this country. Turning Point USA has never had more people wanting to join their mission. Well, what is that mission? Because Charlie Kirk's murder is starting to be taken in different directions with different agendas. So I wanted to talk to a very good friend of Charlie Kirk's and a very big part of what Turning Point USA is going to be about, all right? He's going to come here, he's going to tell you where the record should be straight and what the future holds. Andrew Kolvet, next. A lot of people are pushing agendas and using Charlie Kirk's murder to do so. So what is the understanding of the people who knew him best? Not just about who's responsible, but what is responsible and what Turning Point USA will do with all of this flush of enthusiasm for it that has happened since the assassination. Andrew Kolvet is the executive producer of the Charlie Kirk Show. He's now helping anchor it because, obviously, Charlie's no longer with us. He's also a spokesperson for TPUSA, Turning Point. And I wanted Andrew to come in and kind of help us understand what is real and what isn't. Thank you for joining me. And again, I'm sorry for what you guys are dealing with.
Yeah, thanks for having me on the show, Chris. And yeah, I mean, it's a tragedy, and we're navigating it as best we can. And you know, you mentioned this flush of enthusiasm, and I think, you know, that gives us a lot of solace in this time because we have things to put our hands to. We have work that's really important to do, and I'm so proud of the team. I just will say that, I mean, from top to bottom, the organization, from the field team to the productions, to what we do at the Charlie Kirk Show, people have thrown their whole selves behind it, and I'm really proud of the whole team.
Give me some sense of how much outreach there has been since Charlie's murder in terms of wanting to grow Turning Point, join Turning Point?
Yeah, I mean, it's been breathtaking, I think is a fair word to use. I mean, I actually have some numbers here that I got just before coming on with you. So we have, since 9/10, we've had about 130,000 inquiries to start either a college chapter or a high school chapter. And chapters that we have already officially started. Now, remember, we had about 900 college chapters and 1,200 high school chapters before all of this. We have added just about 790 new college chapters, and we have added 1,819 new high school chapters. So we've essentially doubled.
So you doubled.
Yeah, we doubled in size in less than a month. All right, in less than a month. And these numbers are growing every single day. I'll have to update them in another couple of days because they'll be significantly higher. We have over 800,000 students in our student network that are engaged or involved in one way or another. So that number was probably around 450,000, 500,000 before this happened. So we've essentially doubled that as well. It's so the response, the enthusiasm has been overwhelming, breathtaking, and it just keeps growing every day, Chris. And you see this. We just did an event with Vivek Ramaswamy at Montana State, and that was a sold-out, packed arena. And they're chanting Charlie's name. They're fired up. They just absolutely line out the door. We couldn't fit everybody in, and we're trying our best to get bigger and bigger venues. And it's heartening. It's heartening because, as you said, people will take this and they'll take it the way they want to. But I know that Charlie would have been absolutely adamant that we get every last ounce of energy out of this, that we were able to bring as many people into the movement, into Turning Point USA as possible. And I think the team is being faithful to that mission. They're honoring his legacy. And like I said, I'm extraordinarily proud of the heroic work that they have done under incredibly difficult circumstances.
Now, there's a lot of distraction because people are seeing opportunity in his assassination. And I wanted to know, as someone who was close with Charlie and obviously close to the investigation and what's happening, do you believe that the authorities have who is responsible for Charlie Kirk's assassination, or do you think it was Israel?
No, I don't think that it was Israel. I think they have the guy that did this. It doesn't mean that I don't have open questions about were there other people involved? Were there other people that knew beforehand? There seems to be indication that there was people that knew something was going to happen. And, you know, there's questions about this Salt Lake City armed queer group and their connections and who maybe financed them. And that's stuff that I am really keen to get to the bottom of. And I know that everybody that's closest to Charlie and closest to Turning Point USA has those same questions. But what I can tell you is that there is a team that's working on it and coordinating with the authorities, and it's an active investigation. We're going to let that play out. We think that's the reasonable thing to do, the responsible thing to do. And sometimes we're not able to speak into different aspects of the case because it's an ongoing investigation. We don't necessarily want to negatively impact that. And so sometimes in that silence, other voices come in. And I'm just here to say that, you know, the communication has been robust with authorities, both federal, state, and local. And we've got a great team that's coordinating and collaborating and working with them. And yeah, we feel like they've got an amazing case, and we're just going to sit and let the process run its course. But just because we are maybe silent, I just want to reiterate, does not mean that we are complacent, does not mean that we are not active behind the scenes. A lot of times with this stuff, you're calm on the top and your legs are going like a million miles a minute. And I think that's a good picture of what's really happening here.
In one way, it's not as much for you about who as it is about what was motivating Charlie Kirk's assassination and how to heal that with Turning Point. How does that focus the mission going forward, if you can give me a quick take on that?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great way to say it. The who, I think, you know, is going to play itself out here. The what, we know what the what is. It was somebody that, or some people potentially, that didn't believe in dialogue, that didn't believe in open debate, that had given up on that. They picked up a gun instead of what Charlie did, which was pick up a microphone. And that is not an America that I want to live in. That is not a country I want to live in. And that's not a country that Charlie believed in or that our founders believed in. And so we want to restore open debate, open dialogue. That's why we keep the tours going. That's why we keep the massive conventions and conferences going. That's why we're moving forward. And we're going to make sure that we honor Charlie's legacy the right way, because I know that he would not want his death to result in our movement, our coalition divided, or Turning Point somehow getting distracted. We're going to stay focused and keep the main thing the main thing. And like I said, the team is doing that heroically right now, and we will continue to do that.
Well, Andrew, I think you guys have a big place in the conversation. That's why I'm happy you want to come to the town hall. It'll be good to see you there, and you're always welcome here to make the case, because conversation has to be part of the cure. And I love that line.
Thank you.
Don't pick up a gun, pick up a microphone. Andrew, I'll see you soon, and I appreciate you coming on tonight. Please send my best to Erica and the kids. I am sorry for their loss.
Will do. Thank you so much.
All right, we'll be right back. We have breaking news on our watch tonight. It seems as though phase one of the Middle East peace deal may be coming to fruition. The terrorists have agreed with Israel to give back the hostages. Leland Vittert picks it up right now, but I know he's not going to tell you this off the top, so I will. Congratulations on Born Lucky, your story, an instruction to families all over this country, on the New York Times bestseller list, and I am here for it, brother. Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you for the very kind endorsement about 10 days ago as we began this journey. And Chris, as you mentioned, so honored to have so many people come along on the Born Lucky journey. My mind, though, when you said that there was a hostage deal, it instantly went to thinking about those families who've waited 735 days and nights and painfully gone through every minute. I was thinking about my dad, if I had spent that time in captivity, what they all must be feeling tonight. You and I, you've interviewed him, I've interviewed him. It is a glorious thing to think about.
If it happens.
If it happens.
If it happens. We'll see. We'll
and
see.
In the Middle East,
I hope it does.
Yeah, I learned through 4 years there. You got to wait to pop the champagne until it happens. But the hope for them is really so important. Chris, thank you very much, my friend.
Well, congratulations, and take it over. Take it over, my friend.